What I'm really concerned about is that what we have as a worse situation than 2008 regarding the finances. So if you look at history and repeat over periods of time, there is the creation of money and debt to get buying power. But that is being produced by central banks that print that money because they can't finance the debt any other way. And that particular dynamic and the extension of it, which is repeated out in time, that is the big concern. So there's a lot of money sloshing around, but if you think about it, the wave of financial assets, and we talk bonds and debt as alike, is believed to be, it gives buying power, but it's also believed to be that one could sell one's bonds and assets and buy goods and services with that, but the amount that exists out there that are claims is far greater than would be allowed to happen. So there's a financial situation which is deeply of concern to me, and to some extent it provides the liquidity for some of these things to happen, but the things that are happening here, other than being reflective of the liquidity, are really just part of this bigger problem, I think. There's not enough financial resources and money to go around. And so I understand the needs for that kind of spending and the actions that have been taken so far in terms of that kind of stimulus. But it is a mistake to believe that the lower interest rates and the debt service payments are the only consideration, because all those bonds, the debt is converted into a bond and has to be sold. And it has to be sold to buyers who then find it attractive enough to own it. These interest rates are minus 1% in inflation-adjusted terms and about 1%, a little over, in actual terms. And they build a pile of those debts that the bondholders believe they can turn into buying power by selling the bonds and making that purchase. I don't mean to sound technical, but what I mean is that when you have a lot of claims of assets, they're not providing a good return, and you have the world own too many of them, it's not probably going to be able to be bought by those. That means that they will have to, Federal Reserve will have to make up a gap, a funding gap. The upshot of this is it is in cycles. This has happened throughout history. You can go back thousands of years and you see the pattern. And that pattern is not a pattern of good finance. It risks the dollar. It risks that the possibility that that won't be a good storehold of wealth, those bonds. And that's not good, sound finances. So one should not delude oneself into believing that because interest rates are low, that's not a problem.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now, let's continue.
That's not a problem. I think it'll be a problem. I think one of the most important things to consider too is that money that's going to be expended also going to be productive in terms of producing goods and services and so on in its way? I don't think we're paying enough attention to productivity either. So I'm just a mechanic looking at how the machine works. And my definition of the machine is that it's very concerning. It's a major issue. Debt is money. When you produce debt, it's an obligation, when you're holding a bond, to deliver money, and you have to produce money. And we're producing a lot of it. And if you look at the holdings in the world of bonds and who is holding them, there's less, they're overweighted in bonds and therefore overweighted in dollars and dollar assets, and we're going to try to sell a lot more, and that has created a risk for the dollar. The dollar's down about 12% since the actions have taken place. It's an issue. It's important because if you lose your reserve currency status, you lose your exorbitant privilege really to get money and borrow it when you need it. So it's a risk. That money can go into an alternative currency or it can go into alternative assets. Traditionally, all devaluations drive money into stocks, gold, other assets. And so you don't have to just go to another currency in order to escape the bonds. You see devaluations of the dollar in relationship to all financial assets. But it's also coming at a time when China is also opening up its financial markets, and the world is underweighted in its financial markets. It's a viable economic alternative. It's a viable economic competitor. It's developing more capital markets. It's the second most important capital markets. They are opening up. And because the world is overweight in US dollars, the flow into that to rebalance is strengthening the renminbi. And the Chinese have intentionally not developed it because it's somewhat the internationalization of the renminbi. But now there is the internationalization of the renminbi. So to put it in perspective, China is now the largest country in trade, in world trade, exports, imports. It's larger than the United States. It's the largest in the world. And yet virtually none of its transactions are done in its currency, about 2%. So there will naturally, increasingly be the internationalization, and it will represent an alternative. And that's why then we have the issues of capital wars. Traditionally, this has happened through cycles. The Dutch and the Dutch guilder, the British and the British pound, the American cycle, and now the Chinese. And as a result of that, we're going to see more of that kind of movement. I think sometimes we think that if we get a good leader, President of the United States or Treasury Secretary or someone, that they can deal with the issues and bring about good results. There are sometimes circumstances that they find themselves in, which the United States is largely in, which is it spends more than it earns, and it finances it with debt by a lot, and it has to sell those bonds. And there are no easy answers to that. You could have a very good person in the job, and that doesn't necessarily lead to great results because the circumstances of the maneuverability is different. And so I give that example. They had to send the checks. If they didn't send the checks, let's look back. If they didn't send those checks and the Federal Reserve did not provide the support, we would have had a rebellion. We would have had people who needed the money not get it. You have a class warfare issue, and you would have had companies fail. So they had to do that. But as that circumstances meant that they had to produce debt and they had to produce money, so there's a mechanics to that. Now, that set of circumstances will exist, and the world, Republicans and Democrats, will debate 500 billion here or there or something, but the big picture is that situation is ahead of us. And it's politically challenging. So we bring in the politics. As I say, there are three big factors, and then we throw in the virus. The three big factors are this financial dynamic that we're talking about. The second is the polarity that exists in wealth, values, and politics, which is extreme. The class warfare, the actual willingness and eagerness almost to inflict harm on the other side, and the absence of reasonableness is at its greatest extreme. I looked at statistics and I go back, and you would have to go back to 1900 to find something like this. And then we have the rising of a great power, China, to challenge an existing great power. Those three factors, the financial factor, the wealth gap and political factor, and the rise of a great power, the last time those things happened were in the 1930s. And if you look at history going back over periods of time before that, you could see these patterns in history. Those are the circumstances that we're facing. And so the issue really, I think, is can we face those things in a skillful way and a bipartisan way so that we don't do ourselves even more harm than the circumstances have brought us as a challenge.
What to do in such a situation? Inform yourself and keep your financial education strong. We from the Compact Group offer our loyal subscribers a free educational portal with first-hand monetary, financial, and economic knowledge. Enter our invite-only Insider Club by clicking the link below. You will get access to first-class information far earlier than the rest. We have prepared a special deal for all our members where you can access a giant pool of Robert Kiyosaki's financial wisdom for just $1. To find out more, simply click the link below and join our Insider Club absolutely free. But there is more you can and should do. Build up several streams of income. More and more people realize that they have to take their future in their own hands, but they don't know how and where to start. We from Compact offer our Insider Club members unique opportunities. Strengthen your financial muscle and get the edge. Click the link below. Become part of our free Insider Club. No financial obligations. But there's one important thing you have to know. You have to become active. So do it now. Become active and see you on the other side.